Hey everybody, we are Robert, Martin, and Francis, and this is Snakes and Otters, pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Welcome back to Snakes and Otters.
I am Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
Tonight we are talking about one of the best types of episodes we have, is Our Heroes. So it's episode 69, and...
I was wondering if that would get past anything.
Of course it wouldn't. We're guys. You know, because all guys, we're 12-year-old kids.
We're 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So you say
It's
69
possible.
or
we
or
have
Beaver,
a little chuckle. Yes, that's right.
Or three-way, then it's a laugh.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation about that.
Yes.
And it wasn't even dirty.
That's right. Sexual innuendo is funny at times. Sorry.
Yes.
So it's...
Anyways, so episode 69, Our Heroes. Now, we've done a lot of different people as heroes. They've all been real persons.
Mm-hmm.
Today, or tonight, depending on when you're listening, we are going to tackle our first fictional hero. And to me, he is the embodiment of the fictional hero. He's the embodiment of what it means to be a hero. And that is Steve Rogers, Captain America.
Yeah, amen. Hallelujah.
Now, by now, anybody who doesn't know who Captain America is, they're living under a rock.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is, along with Iron Man and Thor, although mostly Iron Man, because Thor's not quite second string in the movies, but he's not as big as Iron Man and Cap. So they are the two pivotal characters in the Marvel movies. And Captain America has probably one of the best backgrounds for a hero, in my opinion. Yeah. Because he started out as that scrawny little kid. He was the kid who was getting sand kicked in his face at the beach and getting beat up. Right? Only he was so bad that he didn't even get a girl, to have the muscle guy take away from him.
Yeah.
All you kids that don't understand what I'm talking about, is an ad in comics from years and years ago.
Oh, yeah. 60s and 70s.
Charles Atlas.
Charles Atlas ads were in every comic book ever published in the late 60s, early 70s.
That's right. So Steve Rogers, he has this humble beginning. He's an orphan by the time he's in his early teens, late teens. His background is that he grew up in the Depression. Mm-hmm. Right? He came of age during the worst time economically in American history. And he has very humble beginnings. But he always, throughout all of his incarnations, has had the heroic outlook. And that, to me, is he's there to defend the little guy. Mm-hmm. The guy who can't defend himself. To me, that is the epitome of heroic in the big sense. There's lots of ways you can be heroic.
It's a great American character because it echoes, say, a Washington. You're nobody, then you're somebody. And instead of looking for revenge, he decides to be a protector. Yes. And Washington had that same decision to make. I'm now the victor of a war. What do I do? He decided, no, we're not going to go down this road of revenge. We're going to go down the road of building a future.
Right.
And Captain America is the same character. Now, listeners, I was going to do this episode under protest. Because, yes, I really, to me, it was very meaningful to look for the real examples of heroism, throughout history. And the people who have been very meaningful to us, people who appeal to us. But then I started thinking through, well, you know what? I always consider myself to be from the Josie Wales School of Diplomacy. And we've talked about how much Jean-Luc Picard is an influential character to us.
Sure, yes.
So why can't a fictional character be a hero? We're influenced by these characters. If you're a reader, if you're someone who loves fiction and reads, if you're someone who loves movies and you love the characters in them, you are influenced by those creations. You're being influenced by the writers and directors of those properties, but you're being influenced, and hopefully in a positive way. And Captain America is that influence.
Yeah. So you're correct, because and Martin will know definitely I was kind of the opposing viewpoint of his, because I really lobbied hard for doing this. For the very reason you point out, is because real people are often, as we well know, complex. Thank you, Trevor Slattery. And they often let us down in many ways. There's no perfect real person. We find some really great ones, of course. We've talked about many of them. But they're all flawed in some way. But fiction doesn't have to be that way. And Steve Rogers is definitely, when he's written well, he may have a few flaws, but they're very minor. I mean, very rarely is that out there. And I will say for our listeners, too, we're talking about Steve Rogers as a concept. We're going to talk both about the Marvel Universe version of him, but also the Marvel Comics version of him, which is kind of that's the source material. That's really where the heroism is found. Now, let me say, Chris Evans has done a fantastic job. MCU's done a fantastic job, and they got him right.
They did.
It was a proper reflection, and all the things that you just talked about, Robert, about what makes him good, were in, especially that first movie, First Avenger. The basis was
Johnston were the directors.
Joe Johnston was the director of
Captain America:
the First Avenger. That is correct. Yes. Yeah. Now that's the only one he did.
Yeah.
But that laid the foundation, and every single director who's directed after him, that's both in the Avengers movies and in the other two movies that were his, although Civil War was basically Avengers 2.0, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. Right.
It was titled one of his movies. It was sort of one of his, but it's really more than that. But they all got him right, which is astounding.
Yeah. It is, because he's a difficult character to get right in this day and age. Because
he could be Captain Sanctimonious if you're not careful.
He could be. So, Joe Johnston did a fantastic job in First Avenger, because you're right, he did lay out everything that is essential. But before we get to the Marvel Universe, Cinematic Universe, let's talk about the origins of the man.
Yes.
Right. So, you cannot talk about Captain America and truly understand him without understanding the World War II origin. So, Simon and Kirby, Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, they are the creators of Captain America. And they, at the time, they were the editor and art director, basically, at Timely Comics, which eventually becomes Marvel Comics. And back then, creators didn't really own their own stuff. It was very rare that you had any kind of
work for hire
situation where they had an interest in the comics. So even though they only did the first 10 issues together, they're still the ones who laid the groundwork. So Captain America, in the very first issue, is shown punching out Hitler on the cover. And that iconic scene is done in the movie.
Sure, yeah. They even show the comic itself at the very end.
And they show the comic.
And it's a very meaningful thing, because Kirby and I believe also Simon are from Jewish backgrounds.
They are both Jewish. They were both practicing Jews. So it wasn't even just congenital.
Yes,
Jacob Kurtzhoff was Jack Kirby's
Kurtzberg
is right. Was his real name.
That's right.
And he anglicized it because it was hard to get work at the time.
So they got a lot of grief. Because remember, this came out in 1940. Late 40 to 1941.
Yeah, we weren't even at the war.
We weren't at war yet, and there were still a lot of German sympathizers in the country. And, of course, there's always a lot of anti-Jewish thought in the country at this time as well.
Sure.
There still is, but it's what we have now is nothing compared to what it was then.
Yeah, it was almost systemic in certain locations.
Yes. So they got death threats, literal death threats. And Jack Kirby, he's the kind of guy that was not going to stand up to a bully. He grew up in the streets of Brooklyn, I think it was. Brooklyn or the Bronx? It was Brooklyn.
Steve Rogers was Brooklyn.
Well, yes.
Jack Kirby was the Bronx.
Okay. Could not remember.
Like Ben Grimm was the Bronx.
Yes.
Yeah. Who is basically Jack Kirby projecting himself into the role.
So there's a great story about Jack Kirby. And this tells you the kind of person Kirby is, because Kirby is really much associated with the character now, because he's had more creative work with him. There's a story about New York City is where all this stuff happens. The comic industry is based. And Kirby is working at some company, might have been Timely, I don't remember. And a guy comes around saying, "You guys, you're going to use our towel service." I was like, "We already got a towel service." "No, you're going to use ours. Everybody in this building uses ours." So it's shakedowns, mob, right? Yeah. So Kirby, who's like 5'6", maybe he was a small guy, very small. 5'4" was probably more likely what it was. He goes up to this guy who's like 6 feet, so a good 8 inches on him, and gives him all kinds of grief. I mean, he was ready to take his coat off and roll up his sleeves and beat the crap out of this guy. because he told the guy who was running the office, like, you got to stand up to those guys, because if you let them push you around, they'll always push you around. You'll be under their thumb. So Kirby made this guy back off. He fought the mob and won. All right, just on the force of his own belief and personality, of what was right. No, pre-war.
Pre-war. See,
pre-war.
Because one thing you have to understand about Kirby too, a lot of his formation too was during the war, because he actually saw combat.
He did.
He was known for being a scout too, even though he was just a grunt. Because of his art talents, he could go forth, see enemy positions, because he was in Europe, and draw things out in a legible, easy to understand fashion. So he actually put his artistic talent to work for the war effort. Yeah.
So that's their background, and all of this patriotism, because they were both proud to be Americans. Even though the grief they got being Jews and the hatred they got, the death threats, that didn't matter. They saw what was good in the country. Yeah, there's flaws. There are more flaws then than there are now. There's going to be more flaws now than there will be in the future. But they saw what was good about the country, what we aspired to be. And all of that gets rolled up into Captain America.
Yeah.
And he fights Nazis. That's what he's created to do, is to fight Nazis. He wears the flag. Right? You don't get much more patriotic than Captain America. And he goes to war with other characters. The whole thing is, even back then, there were team-ups, there were teams, and all of that. After the war, superheroes weren't quite as popular, so kind of that peters out.
Right.
And eventually, he's brought back in the early 60s to Marvel, when Timely has become Marvel. And he's brought back as the same character. He's not rebooted. That's one of the great things, because all of the Silver Age characters from DC are kind of rebooted versions. In most cases, really rebooted. Yeah. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are sort of rebooted. There's continuity there, but
they're really the only ones that survive.
They were, yeah.
Most of and part of this was just because the way the world changed is. The superheroes were passé after the war.
Yeah.
And horror took a ascendancy for a long time. And then you had the implosion, basically, in the mid-50s with the book The Seduction of the Innocent, where all of a sudden you've got congressional hearings about how comic books are creating what they call juvenile delinquency, which the entire term is unbelievable. You would never hear that word today. It just kind of shows the anachronism that it was.
But, in a way, just to get to rabbit hole for a second,
we do that, yeah.
That's no different than, in my mind, the crusades against violence and sexual situations in video games.
Absolutely.
Because we say the same things about Grand Theft Auto.
That's correct. These things keep coming back. And they come from perhaps a pure motive of wanting the world to be a better place, but they almost always take the form of a witch hunt.
Yeah, and that's
censorship
the issue with that.
Extreme, and that's. But that was kind of where all this came from. And Captain America was almost a reach back to something pure and good. Not reach around, reach back to something good and pure. Realizing, we did this once, and it was pretty darn good.
Yeah,
and that was Stan Lee and Jack Kirby together. Kind of said, well, we got this guy on the shelf here. He's remembered. He was one of the more successful that we had in our stable. Let's bring him back. And you're right, and I'll give Lee credit for a lot of that, where he brought the same character back and kept all that backstory.
Yes.
That is essential to understanding the character of Captain America. It's one of the reasons he deepened the character, because otherwise he could have been just a showboating patriot.
Right.
He is actually now a man out of time.
Yes, and
that is that depth of it he gets.
And they do that very well in the movies, that whole man out of time.
That is correct. And because that was so core to why he became
that was a part of it.
And I almost think it was kind of accidental. It was a way to bring the character back, but I don't think they realized, I don't know, you'd have to ask Stan Lee, and of course you can't, but I don't think
they seized on it pretty early, though.
Yeah, if you look at long to realize we recreated something better here than the original ever was, and let's roll with it. Because some of the best stories, if you read Captain America's, and he's got hundreds upon hundreds of issues in since 1963 when he was revived, both on his own and with the Avengers and wherever, because he's a very popular character. He's always done best when that comes out. Now, it wanes a little bit. By the time you get into the 90s, 2000s, and today, it's not as big a deal because he's acclimated. And they've allowed him to grow a little bit.
Well, yeah, you can't play that man out of time for 40 years.
That's correct. Sooner or later, it runs out of gas. But nevertheless, it forms him. And he's a really fantastic character. Let me give you one of my favorite moments of his exemplar of how he is. And you've got your own, I know. We all do. But there's a moment in Civil War. You remember one? The comic book.
Oh, in the comic Civil War.
In the comic Civil War, that's correct. They didn't steal this in the movie. I almost wish they had, because they almost came close. Winter Soldier had a little bit of this, where basically he's in a helicarrier and he's told you will sign these accords, and he says no, I'm not going to do that. And what does he do when they try to capture him? This is kind of like what the elevator scene in Winter Soldier is kind of stolen from this. He takes it. They try to overwhelm him. Of course, they fail. He busts out of the helicarrier 35,000 feet in the air and manages to survive by taking over a plane.
Right.
And making his way down. Well, Winter Soldier steals that scene. They remade it a little bit. That, to me, is one of the most badass scenes that's ever been done. And I really am... I mean, they wisely picked the right thing to kind of modify and adapt. It's one of my favorite scenes of all the Marvel Universe, is that time. He gets on the elevator and...
Does anybody want to get off?
Does anybody want to get off? That's exactly right. And it's exactly the same thing.
That's... Martin, you've been listening to us ramble, so I'll give you the opportunity to jump in here with anything, because, Francis and I could go on and on about this.
It's good.
Well, and my comic book period is a little briefer than your all's, but I do remember, the kind of that Bronze Age of the Avengers. Cap was not the leader; it was Stark, and Iron Man, and it's gone back and forth,
right? Yeah, over and over.
But it's the part that I like about Cap, both in that era of comic books and in the MCU, is he rubs off on others.
Oh, yes. That's
they
very true.
don't view him as like this sanctimonious goof man out of time. Stark pushes that a little. This is the guy my dad was all big about. Yeah. But then there's
a little jealousy on that too, though.
They finally kind of come to understand, I will always be able to count on this man.
He is the real deal.
Yeah. And then, all the other characters, too, began to... there's a great scene, Ultron, Age of Ultron was just on, and that great scene towards the end with the train, and Cap's with Wanda and...
Black Widow.
No, well, Black Widow's disappeared now.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but he's on the train, and Hawkeye has the cradle with the Vision
in it, yeah.
Yeah, and he says, well, Stark will take care of it. And Wanda says, Ultron can't tell the difference between saving the world and destroying it. Where do you think he gets that? From Stark.
From Stark, yeah, that's right.
So that's that window into, Stark could be the leader, but there's a path he may take you down that doesn't work. Cap, you can always trust to find the right path to take you down. And
that's a great observation.
It rubs off on the other characters, even though the twins have that reason to hate. They're now moving to the side of the light.
Right.
Not just because they've seen the extremity of where Ultron is, but they've also now been with Cap, and they understand, that Ultron's way is not the way to fix the issues.
Right. Philosophically, because we have to go there at some point.
Yes. That's right. Yes.
Somebody like Cap is best understood when you have something to juxtapose him against. The good, what is true and good, is almost always best understood when juxtaposed what is dark and evil.
Right.
And that's what's happened there.
Yeah.
She has seen the darkness of Ultron, and that helps her realize the light that he represents.
And sometimes it's hard to figure out the dark.
It is.
Because, again, with Stark, doesn't see Ultron as dark.
Well, not initially.
Right. This is the guy that's, like he says, eventually they're going to roll up to the door of the club, and what do? Ultron was supposed to prevent that.
Sure. Yeah, and that's one of the brilliant things about how this works is that, and we haven't really talked about this, Cap really works well under all circumstances. But putting him with the right villain makes a little bit of a difference.
Yes. Before we go there,
Yes.
A couple of things I want to make sure we cover. Because it's essential to understanding why he's a hero to me.
Yes.
Yes.
And why he works so well in these situations we've talked about. So one of the things that I think is a truism no matter what is that there are certain things that are always good, always true. There's certain universal principles that every person should be able to aspire to. Right? Universal truths.
Right.
Obviously, as Catholics, we're going to believe that.
That's right.
He embodies those universal goods in so many ways. Those morals. He is the most moral, ethical man in comics. But again, he's not sanctimonious about it.
Correct, yes.
He is moral and ethical by what he does, just as much as by what he says.
He's not one for grandstanding, although he gives a great speech.
He's a great speech maker.
Yes.
But it's always off the cut. It's not to manipulate.
No.
And it's not even necessarily meant to inspire, but it always comes off that way.
Always
That's
does,
why if you get a great writer who
Yeah.
can write good cap speeches, oh man, you got gold there.
You're
His cap
exactly right.
speeches are always, this is the course I'm going to take. You make your own decision whether to follow that course or not. But I'm going whether anybody else does or not.
One of the great things about him is playing to another fictional heroic figure that listeners may be aware of. I don't know if you guys are. So one of the things I was thinking about, you talk about Cap in a group in the Avengers and how he makes everybody better. He's like the best player on your basketball team. Mm-hmm. He makes everybody else around him better. Right? And that's part of the essence of him.
Yeah. It's not important to score 60. It's more important to have the 15 assists.
Right. He is, because it's all towards defeating the villain, achieving that goal, which is either win the game or success against the villain.
Save the world, baby.
Save the world. And that is one of the things that he expects. While he doesn't say you have to follow me, after he lays it out, he puts it back on you and expects you to make the right choice. And the only way you'll ever disappoint him is by not following.
Yeah, by making the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Happens occasionally.
Now, you may make mistakes, but that won't be what disappoints him.
Yeah.
It'll be choosing not to follow. And he expects more of you. And he holds you to a higher standard without even telling you that. And that's a trait of another great heroic figure, which is Honor Harrington.
I suspected you were going to go there, yes.
Okay. Honor Harrington is a character in David Weber's Honorverse. She's a captain, then eventually an admiral in a navy, space navy, that is basically a fictional representation of the United Kingdom. As a matter of fact, even the Queen is Elizabeth.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And they're fighting against... oh, crap. I'm blanking. They're fighting against the People's Republic. That's what it is. And it is basically the French after Robespierre takes over. Mm-hmm. And so it's basically it's Wellington versus Napoleon is the framework.
In many respects, this is very similar to a British Navy series like Jack Aubrey, Patrick O'Brien, or others. Master and Commander stuff, exactly. Alan Lurie does a really great series too.
So Honor Harrington,
moved in time.
That's the thing about her, because she's a great leader and great heroic figure, because she's willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good, and she expects the best out of her people. And that's the only way to disappoint her, is to not give your best. And I think Cap's that same way. Mm-hmm. And so that's the kind of guy that makes you want to follow him. Because not only is he a great heroic figure, but he's a great leader.
Yes.
And I think all that comes out so well in the movies, both in First Avenger and in Endgame. So in First Avenger, there's that scene with Dr. Erskine where they are talking about the procedure the next day.
Yeah, sitting on the bench on the couch, cots.
Right. Yeah, sitting on the cots with the Schnapps.
The schnapps.
That's right. Yes.
And of course, he's about to drink. He says, "Oh, you can't have that. You're having a procedure tomorrow." So, what about you? I can have it. I'm not having a procedure.
That's right.
That's great.
Oh, yeah, Stanley Tucci did a great job in it with a small role, actually.
Yeah.
Because he's not in the movie that long, but wow.
But he was very memorable.
Yes.
But he makes a point about what makes Steve Rogers the perfect Captain America.
Yes.
And that is that the little guy who knows what's right is a better person to be given the super soldier serum than the big guy who's just a bully. Because, like anything, money, power, position, it amplifies what's inside you.
That's right.
So what you do with power as a bully is exactly what you did when you were nobody. You push people around. What the little guy does is willing to stand up for anybody who needs to be stood up for, does that with power.
It's a crucial lesson that Erskine doesn't know until Schmidt.
Right.
That is correct.
Schmidt,
that's right.
From Red Skull.
Which is...
I want to talk about a classic villain. You're going to get there, I know, soon too.
Yeah.
But
well, he's the epitome of the Captain America villain because he is the, he's the stand-in for Hitler.
Right.
Because you can't really have him literally fight Hitler every issue. Punching him out on the cover is one thing because that scene didn't actually happen in the comic.
Oh, well, I'm telling you though, my favorite line from the first Avenger is when he's free and the guy says, "Do you know what you're doing?" "Yeah, I've knocked out Adolf Hitler over 200 times."
Yeah.
I mean, it was brilliant, tongue in cheek for us fans. We all gonna go but it works for anybody that's seen it.
It does. So, and that's just him. He knows the right thing to do, and he doesn't care about the consequences to himself, and works out all right in the end because he is so good.
Yeah.
Now,
and you're right. The Schmidt is the exact opposite. If you have no value to Schmidt, you have no value at all.
Right. Well, he's the perfect villain in this sense because it truly is just the exact opposite. For Captain America, Steve Rogers, he believes in my favorite Catholic principle: the inherent dignity of the human person.
That's right.
And it's obvious in everything he does when he talks to people, when he interacts with them. Schmidt, the Red Skull, believes in the opposite of that. He only believes in the dignity of himself. Other people are not real to him.
It's interesting you say that because reflections. That very scene, that when Steve Rogers goes behind the lines, he goes to rescue someone, Bucky Barnes in particular, but everyone in general, and that's what he does. He says, if I'll find as many as I can, meet me in the clearing. Schmidt, at the very same moment, and this is Joe Johnston's brilliance, he's juxtaposing to these moments, is as these men break out, Schmidt is all of a sudden blowing everything up, and Zola next to him, he goes, "What are you doing?" He says, "Our forces are outmatched." Boom. We're done. We're blowing it up, and we're out of here.
There are always more workers.
Herr Zola. That's right. And that's when he goes up and gets in his little weird ass cool plane, and he says, "What about me? Here you go. Not the scratch doctor," and gives him the rolls.
That is such a Jack Kirby thing. That's playing with the rotating.
Well, in that car too.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So let me interrupt you here for a moment, though, because we have not discussed bourbon yet.
We have not. Well, Cap's not a drinker.
Cap's not a
drinker.
Yeah,
it's correct.
It doesn't do him any good.
It doesn't do him any good.
Which I thought was brilliant in that movie. It talks about, he says, "I can't get drunk." It's just...
But he's also not a drinker because it's just not his nature. He doesn't need that release as so many people see alcohol. But he also probably been too poor to do much of it before he became Cap. It wouldn't have taken much to knock him on his ass when he was that scrawny little kid.
Yeah, 90-pound ass.
But I'll just mention we are recording in person today.
Yes, how could we forget?
That's right.
Studio F, as I call it, but
yes,
Francis,
the top floor of the Baxter Building. Yes, we are, which is new. It's a relocation into much better quarters than where we were before in its basement.
The new Four Freedoms Plaza, as it were.
That's exactly right. Yes, and enjoying some really, really great bourbon.
Yes.
Wow, I just actually took my first sip. Of course, we've been talking a lot.
Yes.
And Robert, you've brought an amazing bourbon we've never had before, and I am in love.
So this is Knob Creek Smoked Maple, and it is really good. I was not sure what it was going to be, because when you start adding flavors to bourbon, it can get tricky.
Yeah.
I've had some folks that my brother speaks of it often. He says the watchword is "Don't fruit the beer."
Right.
Don't add something fruity to some of these alcoholic drinks. I kind of like it usually. Unfortunately, maybe that might be the minority, but damn,
depends
this is
on-
good.
Right. It depends on how well it's done. If it blends as opposed to overpowers.
Correct.
This is a good blend to me.
Yeah. It's
Yes,
exactly
I mean,
right.
because maple should work anyway, because that's what you're hoping to pull out of those barrels is that that little bit of that sweetness from that the charred oak. So I'm doing another glass of Old Tub. I am hoping to partake of Knob Creek smoked maple the next time we gather, but
This is... we've talked a lot about the Old Tub, so pardon me if I
go ahead.
expound upon this. So this is... it's very smooth.
It
Very
is.
smooth. It's a relatively inexpensive bottle. I got a 750 milliliter bottle. I think it was $750 for $32. I think it was.
Yeah, well, Knob Creek is very reliable. It's a little more expensive than your bargain basement.
Well, it depends. They have some lower end,
Right? Yeah.
but this
Yeah,
is
the
mid
usual-
range. But for really, I think they could charge more for this. I really do.
32 is for small batch stuff. 32 is very reasonable.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, there's a sweetness to this.
There's
I was
sweetness, but there's still a
unprepared for.
burn that is very. It's a smooth burn. It's not harsh at all.
Reminds me of a pancake in a little way,
but
but in a good way. In a good way.
Uh,
Yeah,
yes.
that's what it should though.
No, that's right, it's
little
the
bit-
maple.
That
It's
little
the-
bit of that maple should remind you of the sage in a breakfast sausage.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm not a day drinker, but this could be a breakfast bourbon with your sausage and
Yeah,
pancakes.
that's a very interesting way of
Well, I
doing it.
wonder what it would taste like in a shot of it in coffee.
Oh, I bet this would be good.
You wouldn't need a whole lot, just
Right, because if you like your
thimble-
coffee sweet,
Yeah, just
I
a
agree.
little bit,
Sweetener.
and drop into black coffee, and then have a hearty breakfast. I bet it would be solid.
I bet it would.
I think that sounds like a call for us to go eat breakfast somewhere together. You just bring that
There you go. There
That's,
you go.
yeah, well,
black coffee all around. No, we've got our own sweetener. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's right.
No, we don't need cream and sugar. We got our own.
No,
I
you
got
turn
flasks
away.
around here somewhere.
Yes,
Yeah.
if I were going to mix anything with this bourbon, it'd probably be coffee.
There you go.
Because we tend to like our bourbons straight. We like the bourbons that are higher end that are not mixing bourbons. Some bourbons, while they are still good because they're bourbons, are better. Not necessarily better, but they're okay to mix with.
Oh yeah, okay to mix.
Yes.
Makers is your favorite mixing bourbon, I recall.
Yes. Now the 46, I think, is not a mixing bourbon. I think because that's a higher end.
Basil is not a mixing
No.
bourbon. Old Tub, I don't know. We didn't try it. I haven't tried it mixed.
Well,
Have
you know-
Martin? No, I didn't
No.
drink it that
I
way.
don't know. That's
No,
that's
but-
one that because it's got a bit of a bite to it. I don't know that I'd want to mix that, but it's hard to say. I mean, and the Old Tub is for its price point is really good.
It
It's
is
good for
It-
$20 a bottle.
Yeah, it's
so.
a very mature adult taste. It's got a little heft to it, got a little bite to it. It's a little bit more. It's not a penny waste.
No.
We don't drink.
It's
penny
not
waste
as much of
bourbons.
a bite as the Devil's Cut,
Right. Yeah, that might be the highest bite we've gotten
Yeah.
so far.
which is still not. It's not a make you cough up your lungs kind of a thing. It's just a bit more of a wake you up kind of a thing. But yeah, I'm really fond of this maple here. This is really good.
You done
It's
good.
a pleasant
sir. I think
surprise.
That's correct. That's
Pleasant
I'm
surprise.
very, very pleased to share this with you because it was unexpected. It was kind of just came right out of
Well,
nowhere.
we've been doing a lot of the same bourbons of late
Well, that's right.
during COVID.
I kind of agree with you.
I wanted
Yeah,
to
we
bring
were-
some variety back.
We weren't able to share, so we were all slurping down, working on those same bottles for months.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right. Now we
we're
can
able to
actually make
spread
our way
around.
through it. Yeah, this is kind of good, like finding somebody in the middle of an ice floe in 1963. To
Exactly.
swing us back around. You never know what you might find out there floating around with the ice.
That's right.
We got to call Fury.
That's right.
So, the other thing I want to talk about with Cap, because this is where I think the movies get the heroic bits right, not just with the character of Cap, but Doug from comic book world,
Oh yes.
as we know, he as my kids call him, comic book world Doug, comic Doug. As opposed, because there's another friend I have, was Doug. We met at Burger King every once in a while to shoot the breeze, and the kids would play in the kiddie area. So he was Burger King Doug, and then there's comic book Doug. And Doug, we were talking about Captain America once, and one of the guys that worked for him, he didn't care for Cap. Younger.
What?
Yeah, I know.
That's kind of like not liking.
Well, because he's
pancakes.
unpowered. He thought he was weak. He obviously doesn't get Cap, because as Doug and I were talking about it, the thing about Cap is, in the end, he's always going to win.
Because he can do this all day.
Because he can do this all day.
Oh, yeah. I love that line.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that line.
Yeah. So, and it's not that he's the most powerful. He's the most determined.
Yes.
He is the one whose cause is almost always going to be the most righteous, especially if he's well written. So when you look at Endgame, I think that's just a great example, the best example in the movies of this, because he's literally fighting against the end of everything.
Yeah.
Because
The end of reality.
Thanos is going to reboot the universe. So he's literally fighting for everybody who has ever lived or ever will live in that timeline. And so the stakes don't get any bigger than that.
That's right.
And of course, he's just a kid from Brooklyn. In this context, I mean, that's literally the best way to put it, because he's super strong. He's got lightning fast reflexes, and he's well trained and all that. So he's the epitome of human physical perfection.
Yeah.
And he's master strategist. I mean, mentally, physically, he's the bomb.
Very well experienced.
And
combat tested.
Exactly. And so he's a natural leader. And at the end, of course, he picks up the hammer.
Yeah. I knew you were going to go there.
The best thing.
Yeah, it is.
Because if there's anybody worthy to wield the hammer besides Thor, it's Cap.
That's right.
Bar none. Because, in the comics, we've already seen that Cap can pick up the hammer. And oddly enough, Cap doesn't change. Other people who pick up the hammer, there's been a handful. They change into a version of Thor, like the Beta Ray Bill. He gets the Thor outfit.
Right. Jane Foster, yeah.
Jane Foster.
And
Cap doesn't
that's
change.
coming in the movies, too.
Yes, it is. Love and Thunder, I think, is the subtitle. But Cap doesn't change. He's already the epitome.
That's correct.
Of the hero. So I think that is a great thing that they've done, that he wields it. He even wields the lightning.
Yeah.
Like Thor does. So he gets all of Thor's abilities.
Right.
But he's still himself. Mm-hmm. So him picking up that hammer, first of all, is just the most incredible spot in the movie. Everybody loved it. Everybody cheers.
That's right. But pays forward what Anthony Hopkins spoke in the very first Thor movie: whosoever holds this hammer, may be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. And then he throws it into the abyss. Well, in many respects, this is the culmination of that.
It is. And the other thing that shows the heroics is basically Thanos' army has landed. Everybody's been defeated. Even Cap's shield has been shredded. And it's at the lowest point. He's basically, he's gets back up, says the line, I can do this all day.
That's right.
He tightens the strap on what's left of his shield. And just as he's about to go and die,
yes,
because he's willing to do it, he's not going to run away. You hear the static and you hear the on your left.
Yeah.
And everybody shows up. And that's when everything turns for Thanos. But, you can see that revives him. Mm-hmm. And he leads them in battle. And they're waiting on him to give the word.
He's the ultimate extrovert. He gains power, influence, and strength from those he surrounds himself with.
Well, yes, but he's also the ultimate introvert because he doesn't need that. Because introvert doesn't mean that you're quiet and you want to be alone.
Right.
It means you don't need other people to give you a charge.
True.
So, to me, he's the balance of both of those. And when they all come in and they're all assembled and they're all waiting. They're waiting on one thing, for him to give the word.
Yeah.
So he calls the hammer, brings it in, big Avengers, and then the quiet assemble, which I was a little, but the more I think about it, I like it because it's very subtle. And they all go off on his word.
Right.
You've got gods and demigods and the most powerful beings in the universe. You're following this guy. He's just a man.
Kid from Brooklyn.
Just a kid from Brooklyn. And he is, by default, the leader. It's not Stark at this point. It's Cap.
Right.
It's not Thor. And to me...
It's not Marvel.
Right. Well, she's not even there yet. Because she comes in after this point.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, to me, that's what Endgame got right about Cap.
Yeah.
Is he's the one everybody's going to follow when there's no hope. Because he's the one who's going to give it to you.
Sure. That's
what makes him the most heroic to me.
Well, good. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure we pulled that out of this is, what... It's not just that it's such a great character, but specifically to you, Robert. What was it about Cap that you find so heroic? So I'm glad you went through that. That's terrific stuff. Terrific.
He's always been one of my favorites. Always.
Amen to that. Yeah,
Great
he's better than Batman. And, a lot of folks would find that understandable, and other people would be upset by that. But they're really, in many respects, they're kind of at the top of their game in two different companies. Batman is a very dark and different character. He also doesn't give up.
He doesn't.
And he also finds a way to win.
They share a lot of traits.
That's right. That's why I wanted to make sure we kind of talk a little bit about that.
But Batman is... He's not quite an anti-hero in the sense of like a Punisher.
Right.
But he's a dark hero.
Right.
Because
he's damaged.
He's far more damaged than Cap is.
Cap
has every reason to be damaged.
But he never is.
But he never is, because he never gives in to that.
Batman is not willing to have people follow him. He does not wish to be responsible for what happens to them.
They both have...
But yet he has. I mean, he's
Sure.
had his Robins.
Right.
And he has
very reluctantly.
Yeah. They
Cap
both
does
have...
not worry about...
Understand that...
Yeah, Cap does not worry about the consequences if you follow him, because he understands it's your free will making that decision. If something happens, that person made that decision. I didn't do it. And that's a leap that Batman can't always make.
Well, and to steal Francis's thunder, the difference there is, as Jean-Luc Picard would put it, if our cause is just, then it is a good day to die.
That's correct. That's very much.
It's a bit of a paraphrase, but
no, that's right.
But it's essentially the point.
If the cause is just and honorable, they
yes.
are prepared to give their lives. Are you prepared to do the same today, Tamalak? And as he says, I expected more from you than an idle threat, Picard. And of course, he says,
"You shall have it."
That's right. That's when the Klingons decloak. Klingon warships armed and ready. Shall we die together? And there it goes. That's one of those great Star Trek moments.
That is
Next Generation.
Third season or second season?
Third season. The Defector, written by Ron D. Moore. One of his best he ever did.
Yeah.
But that was early in his career as a writer. There, it doesn't get any better, folks.
The Defector is one of my very favorite.
If you never watch any other Star Trek: The Next Generation, if you've never watched it, start there.
It's a great episode for a lot of reasons. Cinematically, it's great because, there's that throwaway line about, Mr. Worf, I want you to do something for me.
Contact the security officer of the Klingon ship such and such that
yes.
you just hear in the background. And, of course, we all missed it. It's a throwaway. We don't think anything of it.
So you don't think anything that's going to happen. You think it's the Enterprise against those warbirds.
Yeah.
And then, all of a sudden, they're
revealed,
the ones that are
you realize
yeah.
you've been fooled. This has been laid in front of your nose the whole time, and you missed it.
And cinematically, it was awesome.
That's good writing. That's fantastic writing. And I'll definitely give Ron D. Moore a whole lot of credit for that.
Okay, so we've done our trick.
Yeah. Well,
and I had to bring it up.
Well, you're correct. Well, you started it.
I did.
We're going to have to go.
We normally don't get this far into an episode without some kind of Trek reference.
That's very true.
But that just shows you how great Steve Rogers is.
That's right.
We didn't even need Star Trek references.
That's correct.
We used them, but we didn't need them to get this far.
You are exactly correct, sir. Fantastic.
So, is there a scene or an issue in the comics that gives you that same epitome of what it means to be Cap that I talk about from Endgame?
Ooh, boy. I'm going to tell you. Well, and we all come from a certain era, of course, but we kind of went back and got through. There's some really great stuff. I tell you, my favorite picture was Jack Kirby's picture when he, in Tales of Suspense, this is before our time, actually, but when Kirby brought back Cap in the Avengers, he was soon after that given his own solo series. He was
shared it with
Iron Man in Tales of Suspense because of a production deal that Marvel had at the time. They could only produce and distribute so many books, so they had some shared stuff. That's another story. Cap and Iron Man shared a book. And Kirby immediately, of course, it was his character, drew the art for that series. And before long, they went for a while in the norm, but they went back to World War II.
Yes, did a lot of World War II stuff.
They did a whole World War II stuff, which is basically new stuff, kind of going back a little bit, but mostly they weren't the same stories. There's a scene when they, in the splash page of that first issue, you know the one I'm talking about, where when they went to World War II, Captain America holds up his shield. And Bucky's running behind him, and he's got his foot on the Nazi flag. And a new era is beginning. Captain America in World War II, and it was like the living sentinel of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
is here. I always remembered that. It's primo Kirby. It's a beautiful picture. But I'm thinking, that's Captain America. He is battle-tested on the field, not willing to accept defeat. The star and the stripes of his shield has been raised high, and the swastika has been trampled. This, of course, Kirby's a World War II veteran.
Yes.
He's channeling a lot of that. And it was published in the 60s, but it still holds much meaning for us even today, 50 years later.
Yeah.
If you had to pin me down, what's your favorite Cap scene? It's that page.
Interesting.
But you have one too, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, from the comics, there's just so much. One of my favorites, because again, this is kind of analogous to the Endgame. It's issue 177 of the Avengers, where he's fighting Korvac, who is a nearly omnipotent being.
Oh, I love that.
Michael Saga.
The Michael Saga.
Love
yes.
that stuff. It's some of the best Avengers work ever done.
And so, Cap being...
George Perez did...
No, he did a lot of the covers and a lot of the issues before that, but Dave Wenzel did the interiors.
Yes,
that is correct.
77, you're right.
Yes. So, it's amazing how, full of useless knowledge I am at
But
times.
Perez did do a lot of the issues leading up to that.
Yes,
that is
Didn't draw
correct.
that one.
He was...
Just listeners, he's another great comic creator that we're big fans of. Along
Absolutely,
Kirby
right.
and Simon. And
he
talked about
drew
Joe
a lot of
Sinnott
Fantastic Fours. He did a lot of Avengers.
A lot of
some
Avengers.
Some
Great
serious
artwork.
Wonder
Yes.
Woman, he did a lot of great stuff on that. I mean, we could go on.
Justice League, all of them.
Yes.
So, in that, Cap's kind of held back a bit because they're basically fighting in this guy's living room in his house.
Right.
Forest Hills, Queens.
Forest Hills, yes.
That's right, exactly.
Because they're trying to find this guy, and all their clues have led him here.
Yeah, he's an
Let them
omnipotent being, mind you.
Yeah, he's hiding out in Forest Hills.
Yeah, he looks like a regular guy. He's got a wife who herself is the daughter of a celestial.
Of the Collector.
Of
The collector, exactly.
Yes.
Who
Genevieve
you've seen
Tavon.
in the MCU. And he's unable to live the quiet life like he's trying to. He still is this evil, manipulative.
Well, he's evil and manipulative, kind of in a way, at least in this issue, in the way you're going to talk about Doom next time.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
Because he sees it as he can make it better.
That's right.
But he's using horrible means
Yeah,
to do
he's
it.
trying to release humanity from the whims of reality.
Yes.
I think it's the way he frames it.
So, he takes down everybody. All the big guns. Kills a lot of the Avengers. Actually kills them.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's basically Cap is left. And so Michael is depowered. Because he's, you see him and he's got this orange and yellow glowy stuff around him.
And he's been beaten so hard by several, and I forget who it is.
Yes. Thor has pounded on him. Wonder Man has pounded on him. He's taken a beating.
Yeah.
But he shrugged it off, really.
That's right. Thor and Moondragon are the only ones that live at the end.
Yes.
And Thor's been pushed aside, and Cap basically finds his moment.
He does. So when Michael depowers, and he's lamenting having to kill all of the Avengers because he saw the nobility in them. And it's when he's depowered that
Cap strikes.
Cap strikes.
Yeah.
And so when he's in this human form, Cap nearly beats him.
Yeah, he almost kills him, which is something Steve Rogers won't do, but he almost does.
And Michael makes the comment in it that, you've hurt me worse than
That's
anybody.
right. Of all the ones here, you're the only one that's actually hurt me.
Yes. And that I thought was that was just a great Cap moment.
And of course, he powers back up again, and he kills him. He kills
Yes.
Steve Rogers. Now, just so you all know, the killing obviously does not take.
Right, because as Korvac, Michael ends up dying in this
At the
issue,
very end.
mainly because he gives up. They don't really defeat him. He gives up.
Yeah.
And as he dies, he restores to life all those he had killed.
Like I said, the only one that actually survives him is Thor.
And Moondragon.
And
Moondragon doesn't fight.
she doesn't fight. She just kind of steps aside.
Because she realizes what he was trying to do, and
kind of supported it.
It was a whole neat storyline. It runs from 164 or something like that.
well, actually, you could say some of it started earlier than that because there's these bits where Thor kind of pops in and out.
Yeah.
And that's the Collector doing that.
And that's the Collector
And
doing
that's
it.
the only evidence of evil that the Avengers have is that the Collector disappears in front of their faces
Right.
after telling them, "I'm trying to
Well,
preserve
he's struck
you."
down.
Yeah, he's struck
actually
down.
killed.
The Collector is telling all of them, I was trying to preserve you to face this enemy.
Yeah, and then
And that's the only thing the Avengers had to go on.
Well, the Guardians of the Galaxy have come back into this.
They don't realize that Korvac is
Michael.
Is Michael.
Oh yeah, we're way in the weeds in a. This is one of my few, like, these guys here are listeners. They know all of this stuff from like episode whatever, issue 1. But this is the meat of when I was like 12 and 13 and really following the comics.
Well, it
so
still
love
is
these
one of
Avengers
the very
stories.
best stories ever done, and it was some fantastic stuff.
It was.
And,
Because it bridges fights with Count Nefaria and
I cannot remember the writer.
Ultron.
Actually, I think that might have been Shooter.
That's exactly where I was going. I thought it was Jim Shooter, which God bless him for all the great things that he's done. He was a great comic book apologist and power at one time.
He's a fascinating guy.
He really
I got
is.
to talk to him for about 20 minutes one-on-one at a con a couple of years ago.
And he started writing comics at 14.
Yeah.
Editor-in-chief shortly around this time.
Yes.
And Avengers is still a primo book, and to have him actually writing it, he deserves a lot of credit for some
He does.
really great stories. And this is just one of them.
He got a little whimsical in his decrees and a little crazy with some of the stuff that he was that went back and forth. But he's responsible for a lot of the really good stuff.
Yeah, and he's the guy that's like, you have this little episode in the middle of a book, and you're like, well, where does that tie to? Well, it doesn't tie until 10 issues later, the whole next year.
Yeah, and I don't remember if he wrote all of those or not. I have to go back and look those. I can remember the artists a lot easier than I can the writers.
Right, because the visual works that way.
But still, it was great stuff, and he got Cap.
Yeah.
And that was the thing.
And I think a lot of what he did and that whole idea of you could draw these things out across these multiple issues and that you didn't have to have closure at the end of an issue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It inspires the MCU. It inspires Kevin, how do we pronounce his name? Feige?
Yeah. It's something like that. Yeah.
Because he's the keeper of the flame,
right?
As far as the MCU go, he's the guy that's no, don't do that. Yes, do this.
Well, he's forming the editor-in-chief role, which ironically Shooter was doing very, very well because he was able to do this not just across one book, but across multiple books because it is a shared universe.
Yeah.
And he actually gave some chutzpah to the concept of you're not contradicting yourself in this series versus this series. They're actually tied together, which. Of course,
there was always already a lot of that stuff going on.
From a business model, it makes a lot of sense because if once you realize, wait a minute, it's not the same here. You don't account for this. The mask is gone, and you may not be picking up all the issues they put out, but only a select ones.
Right.
Well, you want all your fans to pick up all your books,
right? And and to be fair, there was already that kind of stuff going on.
It was.
He was
very good at
the
making sure
first or the last in a long line of very short-termed editor-in-chiefs.
Archie Goodwin was really good. He was right before him.
He was. He still didn't last very long. Roy Thomas was editor-in-chief. Jerry Conway was editor-in-chief. I think Len Wein, also had a stint as editor-in-chief.
Creator of Swamp Thing, for all you that may be following.
And the new X-Men.
That's correct. That's right, yes.
Even though Claremont's the one who took over the writing after that. But he was the first one after Stan Lee to stick for a long time.
Len Wein just passed away, actually, like last year, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Speaking of those who passed, last time we were together and recording, we talked about the great Joe Sinnott. And we talked about, he's known primarily as an inker to today's audience. And I said, I'm sure he's done penciling, but I just don't know of it. He did a lot of penciling in the 40s and 50s. Right. I was doing some recent reading on that. So I just want to, if anybody says, you got to do your comics. Well, that 40s and 50s stuff is a little bit before my time.
Yes.
So, give me a break.
Yeah. We try to do the very best by these folks who have... These are creative souls. And even if you're not into comics, you have to love somebody who is good at their artistic craft. That's one of the reasons we pull out some good things about...
Yeah, that's become a regular feature of this podcast.
Regular theme
is appreciating the creators.
Yes, the artistic
not just
craft
the character. Not just
folks.
getting balled up into the character, but really understanding that writers, pencilers, the artists, the actors, the directors, that's where a lot of this is coming from.
Oh, yeah.
And we want to appreciate them.
Very much. So. That's kind of a regular theme of ours because we'll talk about John Milius, John Wayne, Charlton Heston. And,
the creators, it's not even just the typical creators in terms of acting, writing, directing, musicians, and graphic artists, anybody who creates something new, you create a new product, you create a new business, whatever. To me, that's all creativity.
It is. It's very much creative.
The creative impulse to me is a reflection of God within us.
Yes, absolutely.
Ooh, well said.
That is something that is unique to humanity, and it comes from God. There's no question in my mind. Now, our atheists, we can argue the existence, but nevertheless, you can't argue the spark, wherever it comes from.
Well, that's a very interesting theological point, because
we do that, don't we?
Obviously, there is no creation without God.
Well, that is correct. In fact, the creatability we have comes from our Creator as the source, the
part
prime
of it
mover
being made in the image.
Exactly, in the image and likeness.
That is
not
just outward. It's that creative
in fact,
soul.
It's not outward at all. To be honest,
right. It's entirely the internal.
That's right.
The way I like to talk about when I explain this to others that either don't know it, others RCIA or whatever. Image and likeness is about the ability to think and to choose. So,
and to
that's
create.
The reflection.
Well, that's the thinking and the choosing.
That's
that
right,
is expressed in the creativity.
That's exactly right.
Because you have to think about what you're going to do, and the doing, the acting.
It's one of the reasons of the sacredness of being a parent, because by conceiving children, you are participating in that creative act, and it's one of its highest levels.
I would argue that it is the highest level.
Yes,
because it is the closest to the life of the Trinity that man will ever achieve. Where you have that total giving of oneself to the other, such as with the love between the Father and the Son.
That's right.
Which is so real for a human that 9 months later you have to give it a name. Okay?
That's right. That is.
And start saving for college.
Right.
And
that is the intention. That is the standard. That's where we're reaching it. We don't always reach there, of course, but that's where we're supposed to. We try.
We got to stop because
we're running over time.
We've turned comic books now into. There's a specific kind of theology this is, right? There's like a term for this part of theology, right? I cannot remember. Is it Christology?
Well,
or is that
no,
something
not
else?
Christology. I mean, you might say that there's a little bit of systemic theology in this because it's foundational.
Yeah, foundational theology is pretty good.
It's Steve Rogers is a Christ-like figure.
What this is?
Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely.
Almost
all superheroes are Christ-like figures when they are at their best. Superman is the ultimate Christ-like figure.
Yeah.
Jor-El gives his only son to humanity to save them.
And Stark becomes the Christ figure then at the end of Endgame. So, but we've got to stop. I mean, that's wow.
Which is ironic considering that so many of these characters were created by Jewish men.
Isn't it amazing?
Well, I mean, Siegel and Schuster created Superman. They're both Jewish.
That's right.
So, but it just shows you that those are common themes to our common theological background.
Yes, a
Judeo-Christian culture.
Cultural background of the Latin West. A plug for Tom Holland's new book, Dominion, that I'm about a third of the way through, is discussing this very thing. But, Francis, buddy, what is next?
Well, in many respects, it's going to be similar. We're going to shift gears, though, because we've talked about perhaps the greatest hero in comic books, arguably. We will definitely talk about next time the greatest villain, not just in comic books, but in my opinion, of all time. And as we know, heroes sometimes are only best when shown with great villains. We're going to talk about the greatest villain that has ever been created, in my opinion, and we can take pot shots at it if we want to, Victor Von Doom. Awesome. Dr. Doom. Created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Fantastic Four #6, way back. Five, excuse me. Pardon me. It's all right. I knew that. I just came right out. But wow, you want to talk about a great villain. We're going to explore that deeply next time. He is the gold standard. Please join us.
Terrific. Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.